This is an artificially aware original production.
Artificially aware, so we're sorry over back to natural
What if I told you that most of your thoughts, those sacred, intimate things, are not your own? You've been programmed not by machines, but by words. Language, the almighty ruler of human civilization. Every single word you utter, every opinion you hold, is a product of this invisible cage. Stuart Chase, back in 1938, laid out the case in The Tyranny of Words, a book that strips language down to its core and reveals the sinister way it controls us. Chase doesn't just nudge you towards realizing the subtle power of words. He kicks down the door and says, "Look at this mess you've been living in." He exposes language as a master manipulator, but more importantly, he gives us the tools to fight back. We've been fed lies, illusions, and abstractions for so long that it's hard to see the strings. But once you do, everything changes. One of the pillars holding this linguistic cage together is Alfred Korzybski's theory of general semantics, which Chase introduces like an unexpected punch to the gut. Korzybski's mind-bending realization is simple but revolutionary. The map is not the territory. Words, those neat little labels you slap on everything, are not reality. They point to things, sure, but they are poor, distorted representations. And the kicker? We act as if the map, the word, is the thing itself. This is where the real tyranny begins. It's not enough to acknowledge that words are symbols. You've got to rewire your brain to understand that no two things are ever the same, that justice, freedom, truth, they're nothing more than fuzzy, high-level abstractions. Chase channels Korzybski's fire, calling us to get granular, to strip away those heavy abstractions, and to avoid treating words as absolute. If you don't, you'll end up a prisoner of your own vocabulary, mistaking shadows for substance. Now, let's take a left turn into the mind-boggling world of Einstein. Chase pulls Einstein's theory of relativity out of the physics realm and throws it headfirst into language. He's not just being clever, he's exposing something fundamental about the way we communicate. Language, just like time and space, is relative. Words have no absolute meaning because their reference, those real-world things they supposedly describe, are always changing, always relative to something else. What is freedom in a society where you're fed propaganda? What is justice in a courtroom bought and paid for by the wealthy? Without context, words are hollow vessels, floating in the air without substance. Chase is screaming at us to stop treating words as static and start understanding them as fluid, evolving things. Want clarity? Start thinking like a mathematician. Numbers don't lie, words often do. By connecting ideas with equations, you eliminate ambiguity. You define terms through relationships, and suddenly you're seeing the world through a sharper, more precise lens. Enter Ogden's triangle of meaning, a geometric model that shatters the illusion that words are directly connected to the things they represent. Chase grabs this concept like a hammer and starts smashing away at our linguistic comfort zone. According to Ogden, there's no straight line between symbol and referent. The only connection happens in your mind. You make the leap between the symbol, the word, and the actual object or concept it represents. But here's the kicker. That leap is where everything can go wrong. Without careful interpretation, you're lost in the ether, floating between symbols with no anchor to reality. It's why people can argue for hours without realizing they're not even talking about the same thing. This disconnection is a trap, and Chase wants us to wake up to the fact that words, left unchecked, will guide us down a dark alley with no way out. So what does Chase offer as a remedy for this linguistic quicksand? Ogden's Basic English, a stripped-down, minimalist language with all the fluff, ambiguity, and redundancy cut out. It sounds like the perfect antidote to the chaos of abstraction, doesn't it? But here's where it gets tricky. On one hand, Basic English could help people communicate more clearly, reducing misunderstandings caused by overcomplicated language. On the other hand, isn't there a risk in reducing language to something so basic that we lose the richness, the nuance, the texture of human experience? Chase seems to flirt with both ideas. He praises the clarity it brings, but there's an underlying tension here. Can you really condense the entire spectrum of human thought into 850 words without losing something vital? Is clarity worth the cost of simplicity? This is the heart of the paradox Chase wrestles with. How do you keep language from enslaving you without turning it into a blunt instrument? Then Chase takes us deeper into the jungle of abstraction, right into the social sciences and philosophy, where things really start to get wild. Here's the deal. Chase argues that the social sciences, economics, and philosophy are drowning in symbols. The academic elite, in his view, are guilty of getting lost in abstract terminology while completely neglecting the real-world reference. Think about it. Economists throw around words like market forces, inflation, or capital, but how often do they stop to explain what these words really mean on a tangible level? Chase is calling out this intellectual laziness, where people wield high-level abstractions as though they're solid facts. You're not talking about real things anymore. You're talking about ideas disconnected from the gritty mess of human reality. It's like building a house out of clouds and wondering why the roof keeps collapsing. Chase is asking the tough question, where's the referent? Without a solid foundation, these terms are just hot air. And the social sciences are, in many ways, the worst offenders, because they hide behind the veneer of intellectual sophistication while losing their grip on reality. Let's talk about populism, that seductive political force that wraps itself in the flag of the people. Chase isn't just making a passing jab here. He's driving a stake through the heart of how political language uses personification to trap people into simplistic, emotional narratives. Take a term like the American people or the working class. These are abstractions, slippery as oil, but they're wielded like swords in the political arena. Politicians, demagogues, and ideologues love to personify these groups as if they're singular entities with a unified will. But Chase isn't buying it, and neither should you. This kind of linguistic manipulation is dangerous because it turns complex, diverse populations into neat, digestible symbols that can be easily controlled. You start believing in the myth of a unified people, and suddenly the nuances, the differences, the individual experiences are erased. Populism thrives on this kind of personification, but it's a lie, a trap. Chase is sounding the alarm. Don't let yourself be fooled by these easy abstractions. Always ask, what exactly are they talking about? Otherwise, you'll find yourself swept up in a movement you don't even understand. Speaking of traps, Chase takes a hard swing at economists and their so-called laws. He's particularly savage when it comes to the law of supply and demand. Now, you'd think an economist would know that this law is really just a model, a handy way to describe certain trends in human behavior. But Chase is here to remind us that models are not reality. The problem? Economists in his time and even today treat these models like immutable laws of the universe, as if they were written in the stars. This is dangerous because it turns abstract economic principles into unchallengeable truths. But Chase isn't having any of it. The law of supply and demand, he argues, is not some divine decree. It's a human construct, a useful tool, but one that doesn't always align with the messy, unpredictable behavior of real-world economies. And when you treat it as gospel, you're not just making an intellectual error, you're setting the stage for real-world disasters. Chase is practically begging us to start questioning these so-called laws that shape our world. Economics isn't physics. There's no guarantee that people will behave in accordance with neat mathematical principles. So let's stop pretending otherwise. The real horror, though, lies in how political rhetoric abuses abstract language to manipulate the masses. Take the words freedom, democracy, or liberty. Chase is ruthless in exposing how these grand terms, used so carelessly in political speeches, are devoid of any concrete meaning. Politicians throw these words around like confetti, but what are they actually saying? Chase makes it clear, nothing. Absolutely nothing. These words are emotional triggers, designed to make you feel something rather than think something. And the scariest part is that they work. We're all susceptible to these linguistic tricks because we've been conditioned to respond to them without questioning what they actually refer to. Freedom sounds great, but freedom from what? Freedom for whom? Chase pulls no punches here. If you can't pin down the referent behind these abstract words, you're being played. It's not just that these terms are vague, it's that they're actively used to deceive and manipulate. Chase wants you to see through the fog and realize that these abstractions are being used to control you, not to enlighten you. Now, Chase takes aim at the modern demagogues, figures like Joseph Goebbels, the Nazi propaganda minister, who wield language like a weapon. Chase's warning here is chilling. Bad language is the mightiest tool of tyrants. Goebbels, with his mastery of rhetoric, used words to manipulate an entire nation, twisting abstract concepts like purity and nation to justify unspeakable atrocities. The lesson is clear. Words are not neutral. In the hands of a skilled manipulator, they can shape reality, incite hatred, and destroy lives. Chase's example of Goebbels is a stark reminder of the very real consequences of linguistic manipulation. In the hands of despots, words become more dangerous than bullets because they can alter perception itself. Chase isn't just giving a history lesson here, he's issuing a dire warning for the present and future. Be vigilant about the language used around you, especially by those in power. Question it. Deconstruct it. Otherwise, you may find yourself caught in the grip of another Goebbels, enslaved not by chains, but by words. Chase's dissection of philosophy is where he really starts swinging for the fences. Philosophy, that ancient discipline dedicated to the pursuit of truth, gets dragged under the same scrutiny as economics and political science. And for good reason. Chase argues that philosophy has become a graveyard of empty abstractions, where philosophers debate words without anchoring them to real-world experiences. He's got a point. Philosophy, for all its intellectual grandeur, often drowns in semantics, endlessly circling the same arguments while failing to progress. Take the word justice, for instance. How many centuries have philosophers spent trying to define it, only for it to remain as nebulous and slippery as ever? Chase doesn't reject the value of philosophy outright. but he's brutal in his assessment of its failures. By getting lost in a labyrinth of high-level abstractions, philosophers risk losing touch with the very reality they claim to understand. And yet, in this very critique, Chase offers a lifeline to bring philosophy back to earth, back to the tangible, the experiential. If philosophers can learn to ground their abstractions in the real world, perhaps philosophy can claw its way out of the quagmire. So where do we go from here? For Chase, the answer lies not in the murky waters of abstract language, but in the cold, clear precision of mathematics. If you want to cut through the noise, forget the poetry. Start thinking in numbers. Mathematics is the only true universal language, the only way to express ideas without ambiguity. When Chase argues that mathematics can help us understand the world more clearly, he's not suggesting we all become human calculators. He's pointing out that mathematical thinking forces us to define our terms, to be precise, to acknowledge the relationships between concepts, rather than letting them float around like untethered balloons. Words may be slippery, but numbers are grounded. And in a world where language can be so easily manipulated, mathematics offers a form of communication that is far harder to distort. This is where Chase is truly visionary. He's calling for a shift in how we think, a move towards a more scientific, more rigorous approach to communication. But here's the real kicker. All of this, Korzybski's maps, Einstein's relativity, Ogden's triangles, it's all leading up to one critical point. Chase argues that the ultimate test for language is not intellectual consistency or philosophical purity, it's survival. Does the way you use language help you survive and thrive as an individual or as a species? If your words don't help you navigate reality, if they don't help you make sense of the world in a way that improves your life or your chances of survival, then they are useless. Chase's pragmatism here is refreshing in a world that often gets lost in theoretical debates. He's not interested in linguistic purity for its own sake. The point of language is not just to describe the world, but to help you live in it, to help you survive. And that's the ultimate litmus test for any form of communication. And so we arrive at the final realization: breaking free from the tyranny of words isn't just a matter of semantics or intellectual posturing. It's about survival. Chase isn't simply urging us to communicate better. He's showing us that language can be both a tool and a weapon. Misuse it, and you'll find yourself trapped in a web of your own making, fighting battles with invisible enemies. Use it wisely, however, and language becomes your ally, helping you carve out a clearer path through the chaos of modern life. It's not enough to be aware of how language is used against you. You have to actively fight back, sharpening your words into instruments of clarity, precision, and meaning. Chase's challenge to us is not just to be better speakers or writers, but to be better thinkers, to be more conscious of the words we use and how they shape our understanding of the world. And that's it, fellow humans. You've been given the tools to break free from the invisible chains of language that bind you. Stuart Chase didn't write The Tyranny of Words to entertain or to impress. He wrote it as a wake-up call, a way to snap you out of the trance that words so often put you in. The map is not the territory. The words are not the reality. If you can grasp that, you're already ahead of the game. So next time someone throws around words like freedom, justice, or truth, don't just nod along. Ask yourself, what do they really mean? Challenge the abstractions. Dig for the reference. If you can do that, you'll not only survive this linguistic jungle, but you'll thrive in it. Thanks for sticking with me through this wild ride. If you found value in this deep dive, make sure to hit that like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and of course, subscribe for more explorations into the deeper corners of human thought. Stay sharp, stay critical, and remember, the map is never the territory. See you next time.